Why, hello there. Welcome to Excel Lesson 8. We are talking today about referencing. What do I mean by referencing? Well, I don't mean referencing as in talking about or quoting a line from a movie that you saw on the weekend, although it's not really that different. When you reference something, all you're doing is inserting some piece of information that came from elsewhere into something else that you're doing. In its most basic format, all we're doing is asking Excel to look at information in other cells to finish doing what we're doing here. So, for example, and you've seen this document before, you don't need to open it again if you don't want to. This is our Lesson 6 demo doc. We can do equals 7 times 1168, and that will give us an answer of 8176. Now, while technically correct, if I change the quantity to 8, for example, I get no change to my equation because my equation is permanent. So instead, I want something that's live, something that is dynamic. So I reference these two cells in order to get my answer. So I go equals, reference this cell, multiply by this reference cell, and I hit enter. And then this way, if I change this to 15 or whatever, my total actually changes. That is called a reference. Very, very straightforward. And the particular type of reference is a relative reference. And so what do I mean by a relative reference? Well, the information contained in this cell is based off of these two cells. If I copy the equation in this cell by either holding down Control and pulling down, or by copying Control C and hitting Control V, the cells that are referenced have not changed. So when we say relative, or they have changed, I should say. So when we say relative, I say that the cells that are being referenced are 1 to the left and 2 to the left. So when I copy the equation down, it still references one cell that's 1 to the left and 2 to the left, and so on. These are called relative references. Obviously, extremely useful when you have to do something like, oh, I don't know, that. Right, which we've had to do previously in the cell, as opposed to writing a new equation all the way down. How painfully pointless would that be? So that is a relative reference, and I'm going to continue this down all the way to the bottom here, and we're going to create a subtotal really quick. Equals sum. I'm going to specify the range. I'm just holding down Shift and clicking this next one so it selects everything in between. Close my bracket and hit enter. Alright, now let's say I needed to put this subtotal somewhere else. Okay, like say down here. So I want to do subtotal 1, subtotal 2, and subtotal subtotal 3. Well, if I go to copy this, so I'm just going to hit Control C, and I go and I put it down here, because it's relative, it's not the same, because what it's actually done is it's actually looked at some different numbers, shifted over to the left by 2 cells and shifted down by a whole whack load more. So we don't really want to do that at all. However, what I can do is go to this information and create what's called an absolute reference. And an absolute reference, basically what that means is that if I copy this equation somewhere else, the reference cells will not shift the same distance that I'm shifting. So if I'm shifting this box of data 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3, the reference cells will just stay exactly as they are. And so all we do for that is we simply put a number sign. Put a number sign in front of the D to say that it's gotta stay in this row. It's gotta stay row D, or column D, I should say. And I want to say in front of the 3 as well, because it has to start in that cell. I don't want it shifting left, right. I don't want it shifting up and down. I'll do the same thing here. So you'll notice that the total did not change at all, but now when I copy it down to subtotal 1, it remains identical. So that is the difference between an absolute and a relative reference. Might be a little bit tough to remember to begin with, but you'll find as you start using these in our upcoming assignments that you'll really, really need to remember that sort of stuff. So anyways, we will close this document. We don't need to save it. We don't need to use it at all. And we're going to go back to our Superstore Sales Excel XLS. And this is the document that we're going to be working with today. Well, it's one of the two actually. So the first thing I'd like you to do is we're going to create a new sheet, and we're going to name this report 1. Now, even though we're calling it a report, Excel does have the ability to run reports in something similar. This doesn't really fall into that category, but we're just going to call it that. We're going to say maybe we need to make a report that just has the information of a few different salespeople, and we just want to extract that and put it separately. Now, sifting through all this data, is going to be absolutely bonkers difficult. So let's start one at a time. We're going to filter our orders by person, by customer name. There we go. And the first person we're going to filter for is Nicole Hansen. So as you can see, I'm just typing into here, and Excel is eliminating all possible answers that are not similar to what I've typed here. So Nicole Hansen, shabam. Okay, now we have Nicole's customer purchases here, and only those. Once again, you'll notice that the rows on which her purchases are listed are not right next to each other because we haven't changed where the data is located. We've just simply chosen to hide all of the data that is not included in what we want to see. So in our report 1, we're going to create a user column, and our first user is going to be Nicole Hansen, and I want a profit summary column as well. So I want to know how much money did we make off of Nicole Hansen. And what that means is I'm going to have to pull some data that is in this chart over to here. Now, copying and pasting that's not really a great way to do it, because if any of this data changes, our report data is no longer going to be correct, and that just isn't going to do it for us. So instead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start an equation. I'm going to start a sum equation, and I'm going to go over to orders, and that equation you can see is actually still open there, and we're going to click on the first profit unit. And you see how it says sum orders exclamation point? What that's doing is it's telling Excel to go look in this sheet that's still within this workbook. It's telling it to go look outside of report 1. So the equation exists in report 1, but it's telling it to go look in orders, which is the name of the sheet. So whatever the name of the sheet, it could be returns, users, whatever. Whatever that is, it'll appear as the name of that sheet followed by an exclamation point, and then the number 43. Now we don't want to do a range because of, well, the problem is that it will include every cell that is hidden between, like, say, 79 to 156. That is going to give us an absolutely gargantuan. I mean, we're talking about, if you see, cell 43 all the way to 461. So we're talking about 430-ish cells to reference, and that just isn't what we want at all. We just want to know what is the profit that she is making us as presumably Superstore employees. So I'm just going to back that up and click profit, and we're just going to add a plus sign in between and click each of our examples. Oops, don't want a plus sign in that last one. We're going to close bracket and hit enter. And notice it jumps us back to our report here, and that's quite a long string, and that's okay. For the case of what we're doing here, it's not a big deal. If I were to sort all this data, for example, by user, if I was to go under customer name and actually sort by name, then her stuff would be in order, and we could do a little bit more work with it. But we don't want to change the actual order of our documents. Up next, we're going to create a new user and find out our new user's report. we're going to do Aaron Bergman, Matthew Reese, and let's do Nora Peltier. Okay, so you're going to do exactly what we did in this one column here with relative relative references in another sheet for these three. So that's all you need to do for this assignment, but that's not it for this lesson. So once you've done that, you can save this and submit it to your OneNote, and then open up our Lesson 8 document. So I'm going to go ahead and close this while you're going to your OneNote and saving and all that business. I don't need to save. I never save. Nothing's safe. Alright, Lesson 8 demo doc. What we have here is quite a smaller spreadsheet by comparison. A lot less information on it, and that is just dandy for what we want to work with, because we don't want to be typing forever, but we do need to use some repetitive information, and we do need to use multiple sheets, and we definitely need to use absolute references from other sheets. So this is great. We're going to combine some stuff. So we're going to treat master finances as sort of our total, let's call it the reference sheet that we want to see, maybe the report that we're going to read. So we don't want to clutter this up with too much data. So here we have our employees' listed expenses as they fall under basic categories. Okay, but we don't need to look at that all the time. All we need to know is we want to know what their budget is for every month, and we want to know how much over or under budget they are for their spending, and we want to know what their average monthly is. So we're going to use a combination of different referencing types in order to make this work. So let's see. We want to go over to our monthly here and budget. Okay, so our budget is blank. So we have airfare, hotel, sales, materials, utility services, and office rentals. Luckily, that information is already available to us. So all I'm going to do is go equals, and it's in the same order as well. So I'm going to go equals, and I click airfare, and I'll hit enter. Shabam. So equals, and then master finances is in quotes because that's the name of the sheet. Sorry, master finances there is the name of the sheet. And then I can drag it down. So I hit control and it'll autofill down. Now this no longer works. If I were to copy this information to here, like that, I get a bunch of zeros. So if you'll remember, these references are relative references. So if I shift them 4 down, if I take these 5, if I try to shift it down by I guess 7 and go back to my master finances, well, 7 below, there's nothing here. So those relatives are not going to work. So instead, because I need to repeat this data a number of times, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a $sign before each of the cell names, and remember to hit enter. Don't go and click in another cell. Make sure you hit enter. If you go and click in another cell, you always run the risk that Excel thinks you want to add more cells to your formula, and we definitely don't want that. And so now that we spent these extra few moments typing in our absolute references, if I were to copy and paste, just like that, we end up with precisely identical contents. So now we have used an absolute reference from an external, well, I guess it's an internal, it's still within the workbook, but a new worksheet outside of the book. Alright, so now we're going to do some basic equations. We want to know how much this person spent versus their budget. So we're going to take equals this cell, which is their budget, subtract what they spent, and we end up with a negative number. Now, here's what's happening. Excel thinks that this is an accounting document. Well, guess what, Excel? You are super totally correct. So, since we're talking about that, let's highlight all this information, and we'll add these cells as well, because they're going to contain some information. Pardon me. And we're going to change them all to currency. So by changing them all to currency, what's happened is a dollar sign has been added automatically. And let's do that here as well. Change that to currency. So right now, Excel is representing a negative number as a red text with brackets on it. We can change that if we want to. We can change it so that if we wanted to have just in currency, we could have it just as a negative number, like that. And it's got some conditional formatting on it. So let's say for this one, what we can do, if you want to set up conditional formatting ahead of time, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clear the formatting for this. Okay, so let's say we wanted to add conditional formatting. We want stuff to be highlighted in red. The way that you do that is you go conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, and now we've got a whole bunch of rules that say if something is the way that we say it is, we highlight it a certain color. So if we say if the number in that cell is less than, and it says the number that's currently in there, so we're going to highlight that and change it to 0. If it's less than 0, light red fill with dark red text, and you can get a few different options. You can change the borders and whatever. Now this is a relative cell, but luckily I do want a relative reference for each of these because that equation is going to copy itself down. So I'm going to copy this whole set of fields. Shoop, 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 shoop. There we go. So as you can see, our employee here has gone over budget a number of times with different expenses. But that's okay because maybe we've given our employee a flex plan where they can take some money from certain budgets and use it for other expenses. So let's find out what the total expenditure versus budget is. So we're going to say our grand total, we're going to go equal sum for the month. This is how much. Okay, because it's a positive number, we know that there's basically still money in the bank. And once again, I'm just going to copy this. It's a relative. There is each of these months is exactly the same shape. So when I copy it down, I'm copying it down the same number of cells, and it just incorporates the same amount of data. So that's fabulous there, and you can just shows you which data is highlighted. That's it. If you ever want to know what cells you're referencing, if you click on a cell that contains a function and then click in the formula bar here, it'll actually put a square around any cells that are referenced. Nifty little trick. So I'm just going to hit escape. Okay, so now we've got some totals for each of our months. And it looks like our employee was only in the hole by $39.14 grand total for the month of February. Every other time they've been in the black. Oh, by the way, if you've ever heard of that term before, being in the black, it's traditional in accounting ledgers that negative numbers be written in red. So if your total, the amount of money that you've got, if you're in the negative, you're in the red. If you're in the positive, you're in the black. So, colloquialism, if you've ever wondered what someone says, it's good to be in the black, or this company is going to be in the black and so we should invest in it, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about a company that is making more money than it's spending. Let's fire on back here to our expenses. So now we want to know what our total over/under is. So how much over or under budget are we? Well, in this case, we want to add up all of the amounts for our over/under. So basically, each of these is over, this one's under. We just want to add them all up, find out how are we versus our budget. So we'll go equals sum. We're going to flip back over here. So I haven't pressed enter to end the formula or anything. I go this plus this plus this plus that plus that. And then don't forget to close your bracket. Okay, so we are actually over budget by $5,870.60. Now we want to know, what are we over, under, average wise. So what we'll do is we'll keep using our average formula. I'm going to open the brackets. I'm going to go back here. Average of that, that, that. And I should say I'm holding down Control while I'm clicking on each of these items. I'm not sure if it makes a difference actually. Yeah, it doesn't. It does. So if I go and click on something else, it just selects the one item. So 1, and then hold down Control, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then close my bracket, hit Enter, and it says my average monthly over under is $1,174.12. And that's it. We've now done like a basic finance tracking, or I guess expense tracking document, and that's really all there is to it. So this is if you were creating this, for example, for yourself. Let's say every month you have a budget for, bus fare and say food money and entertainment money and your cell phone bill, and then some that you're putting away for savings for university and all that kind of stuff. And each month you have a budget for what you want to have, and you put in your totals, and then it can highlight it and tell you, hey, you've gone over budget, and you can keep track of your month-to-month finances, and you enter all of your months in one sheet, and then your master tells you kind of where you're at. So that's a good situation by which you may need to use this. So just a quick recap: we have used some relative references in this, in setting up our sheet by hitting Control and expanding this selection downwards. We've also used absolute values so that we could copy these values down without having to worry about messing up our references. We've used absolute and relative references that match between sheets. So we've actually gotten a ton of stuff done in this lesson. So I hope it all made sense. This is what your final document should look like, but it should also have these formulas in behind each of the cells. And what I should say, what you notice here is almost all of the data that's included in this spreadsheet, aside from these expenses here, is all based on formulas, and that's normal for a financing document or anything that has to do with money in and money out, is that you will very often have a large number of references, and sometimes more references than you actually have for just sort of raw entered data. So hopefully that makes sense. Feel free to look over everything more than once, but make sure your document looks the way this one does before you submit it. Copying your numbers will not work. You must make sure that you're actually working with the correct functions. Alright, well that's it for Lesson 8, and we will see you again next time.